The moment I stepped into my brother's lakeside mansion in Seattle, I felt it. The kind of silence that crackles before a storm. The chandelier glowed too brightly, the table looked too perfect, and my mother's smile stretched just a little too wide as she pulled me in. "Claire, sweetheart, so glad you made it," she said, her hand clinging to mine like I might run. My father's handshake was firm, almost rehearsed, and when I caught Nathan's eyes flicking toward a manila folder tucked beneath his napkin, my stomach dropped. This wasn't a family dinner. It was an ambush. If you've ever felt dismissed, betrayed, or made to feel invisible, or maybe you've experienced the deepest loneliness, or that unbearable pain of losing those you love most, share it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, because maybe the next story will remind you of your own strength. The moment I stepped into my brother's lakeside mansion in Seattle, I felt it. The kind of silence that crackles before a storm. The chandelier above glowed almost too brightly, casting golden light that made every shadow seem alive. My mother's smile stretched a little too wide as she pulled me inside. Her grip firm, almost desperate, as though she feared I might run back out the door. "Claire, sweetheart, so glad you made it," she cooed, voice coated with sugar. My father's handshake followed, steady but calculated. The pressure of his palm too controlled, too deliberate. When my brother Nathan appeared from the dining room, his wife Madison on his arm, I caught the way his eyes darted, not at me, not even at my parents, but toward a manila folder tucked beneath his napkin at the head of the table. My stomach tightened instantly. This wasn't a family dinner. This was something else. The dining room shimmered like a stage set. Mother's best china gleamed under crystal glasses, a centerpiece of white lilies releasing their heavy fragrance into the air. Candlelight flickered against polished silver, but instead of warmth, it painted the room in harsh strokes, as if exposing secrets rather than hiding them. "Sit. Darling, sit," Mom urged, pressing me toward my chair with unusual insistence. I obeyed, though my pulse throbbed in my throat. Across from me, Nathan's grin carried that same smug energy I'd recognized since childhood, like when he knew I was about to step on a whoopee cushion he'd planted. Only this time the prank wasn't harmless. As I reached for my water glass, my thoughts twisted. Why tonight? Why the formality? Why the folder? Dad carved the roast with surgical precision, every motion rehearsed. Mom piled mashed potatoes onto plates with her usual flair, her cheerfulness forced, brittle at the edges. For a moment, the clatter of utensils and the scrape of silverware were the only sounds in the room. And then my mother's voice cut through, pitched just a little too high. "How's the clinic, Claire? Still working those crazy hours?" I forced a steady smile. "Business is good. We've increased our patient load by 20% this quarter." Dad's eyes flickered to the folder. Madison leaned forward, her perfume sharp as citrus. "All those patients," she said sweetly. "But such a tiny waiting room. Someone really ought to upgrade your office management." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Pieces clicked together like shards of glass, forming an ugly mosaic. The perfect table, the folder. The smiles too wide, the questions too pointed. This wasn't dinner. It was an ambush, and I was the target. Dad cleared his throat, setting his fork down with a deliberate clink against the china. The sound rang in my ears, louder than it should have, like a gavel striking in a courtroom. His eyes settled on me, steady but distant, as if I were both daughter and business prospect in the same breath. "Claire," he began, his tone smooth, too smooth. "We've been thinking about the future of your clinic." I froze mid-bite. The roast on my tongue turned to sawdust. Mom jumped in before I could reply, her voice practiced, rehearsed. "Family businesses need family management, sweetheart. It's the only way to keep what you've built safe and thriving. Don't you want Healing Touch Therapy to remain in the Donovan family name for generations?" My jaw clenched. "It's not a family business. I built it from the ground up. Every sleepless night, every double shift, every loan payment, it was me." But I didn't get the chance to speak. Madison leaned forward, her smile perfectly polished, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. She had been waiting for this moment. "I've actually prepared a business plan," she said brightly, pulling out a sleek tablet from her designer bag. The screen glowed, reflecting in her eyes like fire. I'd come in as your practice manager, handle the paperwork, the boring admin, the marketing, free you up to focus on patients. Her tone dripped with faux generosity, as though she were doing me a favor. All I'm asking, she continued, casually crossing her legs, is a 30% profit share, which, considering the growth I'll bring, is more than reasonable. The words slammed into me like a physical blow. 30%, just like that. My sweat, my sacrifices, carved into a pie and handed to someone who had never worked a 14-hour day in scrubs, never eaten ramen to cover loan payments, never slept on a treatment table because rent was impossible. Nathan chimed in, his voice steady, persuasive. Claire, you've always been brilliant with patients, but let's be honest, paperwork, expansion strategies, finances, that's not your strong suit. Madison is the people person here. She charmed Dr. Wilson at your clinic opening, remember? He barely noticed you were there. The knife twisted deeper. Memories I had buried came rushing back. Dad dismissing my academic honors. Mom praising Nathan while I stood invisible. Madison giggling with her sorority sisters at my clinic's front desk, handing out discounts like candy while I scrambled to clean up the mess. My pulse hammered in my ears. This isn't just a dinner, I thought, gripping my water glass so tightly I feared it might crack. This is a hostile takeover dressed up as family love. I set the glass down with slow, deliberate precision, my hand trembling only slightly, and I realized, as every eye at the table fixed on me, waiting for my compliance, that the ambush had only just begun. The room blurred for a moment, Madison's words echoing in my skull like a drumbeat. 30%, 30%. I forced myself to breathe, but my mind had already slipped backward, dragging me through the long corridors of memory I had worked so hard to lock away. I saw myself at 22, hunched over a sticky cafeteria counter at the hospital, scrubbing trays during a double shift. My hands cracked and raw from soap, my legs trembling after 14 hours on the floor. I remember staring at the clock at 2 a.m., knowing that in 4 hours, I had to be back in class. I worked nights so Nathan could have a car to get to interviews, Mom had said. He was asleep in that car while I shoveled fries and wiped ketchup stains. The image shifted. My one-room apartment during graduate school. Peeling paint, a couch rescued from a curbside, springs poking through the thin fabric. I ate ramen noodles 3 nights in a row, heating water in a dented kettle I'd bought for 50 cents at a yard sale. Meanwhile, a letter from Sally Mae glared at me from the counter, a $187,000 balance remaining. I pressed it under a stack of textbooks so I wouldn't have to see the number mocking me. Another flash. The night of my graduation. I stood alone on the stage, cords draped heavy across my shoulders, the words valedictorian still ringing in my ears. I searched the crowd, desperate to see their faces. They weren't there. They had left early to make Nathan's rehearsal dinner. Later, Dad took pictures, not of me, but of Madison, wearing my cap, laughing as though the honor had belonged to her all along. I gripped my fork harder, forcing myself back into the present, but the memories kept rising. The summer Madison worked my front desk, her help costing me weeks of damage control. I remembered the phone calls, voice after voice, angry and betrayed. I waited 3 hours and no one saw me. You rescheduled me without asking. Why was my bill different this month? I spent sleepless nights combing through her mistakes, while she sipped cocktails on rooftop bars, posting selfies captioned, "Hard day at work." My chest tightened. My sacrifices weren't abstract. They had names, faces, dollar signs carved into my skin. I had carried the weight of this family on my back, even when they pretended not to see. And now, here they were, sitting under chandeliers and fine china, telling me I owed them more. That what I had bled for was theirs to divide. My hands trembled as I set my fork down. Inside, my voice screamed, but outside, I kept my face calm. Because if there's one thing years of invisibility had taught me, it's that silence can be sharper than any blade. But I knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. I couldn't stay silent for long. Madison tapped her tablet with a manicured finger, the screen glowing like a stage spotlight. Her confidence filled the room, thick and suffocating. "I've already hired a designer," she announced, her tone as casual as if she were talking about new curtains. Your waiting room could be transformed in weeks. Fresh paint, new furniture, maybe a waterfall feature. Patients will love it. And of course, my touch will attract bigger donors. Her words dripped with self-importance, each syllable an invasion. I placed my water glass carefully back on its coaster, lining it up perfectly, a tiny act of control in a night where control was slipping fast. My fingers trembled, but I forced them still. Inside, my mind spun. She's decorating my clinic like it's her living room. They've planned this down to every detail, and I'm supposed to sit here and smile? Dad leaned back, satisfied. See? She's thought of everything. Claire, this will free you from stress. You'll thank us later. The chandelier light glinted off his glasses, making his eyes look cold, detached. Mom chimed in, her tone falsely warm. Honey, you've always been so focused on work. Let Madison handle the hard parts. She's a natural with people. Remember Dr. Wilson? He barely noticed you at your own clinic opening. He couldn't stop talking about her charm. The memory pierced deep. I remembered standing by the refreshments table, my nerves buzzing as I greeted guests. Dr. Wilson had indeed laughed with Madison all night. While I hovered on the sidelines of my own success, my pulse roared in my ears. I could feel the weight of years pressing against my chest. Every dismissal, every stolen spotlight, every sacrifice erased. Nathan smirked, sliding the manila folder across the table with a casual flick. It's all in writing. Just needs your signature. We can start as soon as tomorrow. The folder sat there, a silent threat, its corner peeking out like a blade. Madison clasped her hands, leaning forward, her perfume sharp, almost stinging. It's simple, Claire. Sign tonight, and I'll bring your clinic into the future. The table fell into expectant silence, broken only by the faint hiss of candle flames. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. My heart hammered, but my voice, when it finally came, was calm, almost surgical. You've rehearsed this well, I said, my eyes locked on Madison. But you've forgotten one thing. Her triumphant smile faltered for a split second. I leaned forward, letting each word cut through the silence. This clinic isn't yours to take. The chandelier seemed to flicker, as though the house itself had felt the shift. And for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of doubt in my father's eyes. The silence that followed my words was sharp enough to cut. Madison blinked, her confidence faltering, but she quickly recovered, tossing her hair with forced bravado. Don't be dramatic, Claire. We're just trying to help you. Stop acting like we're the enemy. But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. I pushed my chair back slightly, the scrape of wood against marble echoing through the dining room. My hands slipped beneath the table, fingers brushing the smooth leather of my portfolio resting by my feet. For a moment I felt its weight, solid, undeniable, a reminder of everything I had built without them. Help? I said softly, almost to myself. Funny because it doesn't look like help to me. Dad's jaw tightened. Enough stalling. Sign the papers. He tapped the folder Nathan had shoved across the table, his voice edged with command. I let my fingers find the clasp of my portfolio. The click as it opened was louder than thunder in my ears. Madison flinched, my mother's hand stilled on her wineglass. With deliberate calm, I lifted out a stack of documents bound in crisp navy blue. The Pacific Health Partners logo gleamed across the top, bold and unmistakable. I slid the papers onto the table, right over Nathan's manila folder. The two documents sat side by side like dueling weapons. What's this? Dad's voice carried the faintest crack, a hairline fracture in his authority. I met his eyes. A management services agreement. Signed 3 weeks ago with Pacific Health Partners. They handle all administrative aspects of my clinic moving forward. The air shifted. Mom's mouth fell open. Nathan's smirk dissolved. Madison leaned closer, trying to read the fine print, her manicured finger trembling. I tapped the highlighted section with precision. Section 4.3. No family members may be employed in management positions without unanimous board approval. The board consists of myself and 2 Pacific Health executives, which means I let the words hang, savoring the silence. You're out. The chandelier light flickered above us, shadows darting across their stunned faces. "You went behind our backs?" Nathan demanded, his voice cracking into something childish. "No," I corrected evenly. "I went forward. You were never with me to begin with." Madison's cheeks flushed crimson. "You did this on purpose, just to keep me out." I leaned in, my gaze locked on hers. "I made a business decision, based on experience." The weight of their shock pressed down on the room, delicious and terrifying. For the first time all night, I wasn't cornered. I was the one holding the knife. Dad opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Mom's eyes darted to the lilies in the centerpiece, as though beauty could shield her from the truth. And I sat back, calm at last, as the tide of control shifted in my favor. For a moment, the room was frozen, my family staring at the Pacific Health logo as if it were a weapon pointed at their chests. Madison's lips parted, but no words came. The confidence she'd paraded minutes ago had slipped, replaced by something raw and twitching around the edges. I wasn't finished. Not even close. I reached back into my portfolio, the leather cool against my fingertips, and pulled out a thick folder, its weight heavy with truth. I laid it on the table beside the contract. The spine bent under the pressure of dozens of pages, each one a scar I hadn't forgotten. "These," I said, voice steady, "are records from last summer, when Madison was so eager to help at my clinic." Dad's brow furrowed. Mom's hand went to her throat, her signature gesture whenever control slipped from her grasp. I flipped the folder open. Patient complaint forms, printed and meticulously organized by date, stared up at them. I began to read aloud, my tone clipped, precise. 15 scheduling errors resulting in double-booked treatment rooms, 23 unauthorized discounts, 8 of them to your sorority sisters, Madison. 31 billing code mistakes that nearly triggered an insurance audit. Each number landed like a hammer blow. Madison's face flushed crimson. "That's exaggerated," she snapped, her voice trembling. "Everyone makes mistakes when they're learning." I didn't look away. These weren't learning mistakes. They were careless, made by someone who thought rules didn't apply to her. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, but Dad leaned forward, desperate to salvage control. "Claire, surely." I cut him off, sliding another document across the table, this one from my accountant. "This is an itemized list of the $42,000 in free treatments I've provided this family over the last 3 years. Your shoulder rehab, Dad, Mom's plantar fasciitis therapy, Madison's sports massages before vacations." Silence fell like a curtain. The only sound was the faint hum of the chandelier above us. I looked each of them in the eye, my voice dropping low. "While I was eating instant noodles to keep up with my student loan payments, I was covering your health care. While I was sleeping on treatment tables to save on rent, I was helping Autumn—" I stopped, correcting myself, sharp. "Helping Madison clean up her own messes." Madison's chair screeched as she pushed back, anger flooding her face. "You're twisting this to make me look bad." I leaned forward, my words sharp as glass. "You didn't need my help to look bad, Madison. You did that all on your own." For the first time all evening, no one dared meet my gaze. And I knew. The cracks in their facade had finally begun to show. The silence at the table was no longer polite. It was heavy, suffocating, broken only by the faint hiss of candle flames and the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Madison glared at me, her cheeks flushed, her eyes darting between her husband and my parents, like a cornered animal seeking an escape. Finally, Dad slammed his palm against the table, the crystal glasses trembling. "Enough. Family comes before business, Claire. Always." The old command in his voice sparked something deep in my chest. A memory of curfews enforced with lectures, of achievements dismissed with a shrug, of being told to keep quiet because Nathan needed the attention more. For years I had obeyed. For years I had swallowed my protests like bitter pills. Not tonight. I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood with a sound that made everyone flinch. The chandelier above swung slightly from the movement, scattering shards of light across the table like fractured glass. "No," I said clearly, my voice carrying more strength than I felt. "Boundaries come before exploitation." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Mom pressed a trembling hand to her throat. Claire, don't say things you'll regret. We're just trying to secure your future. I leaned forward, palms flat on the table, eyes sweeping over each of them. My future doesn't need your signatures. It doesn't need Madison's so-called charm or Nathan's schemes or Dad's approval. My clinic is not a piggy bank you get to raid whenever life doesn't go your way. Madison shot up from her seat, chair screeching back. You're so dramatic. Acting like you did everything alone when we've supported you all these years. Supported me? I barked out a bitter laugh. When exactly was that? At my graduation, when Dad took pictures of Madison wearing my cap and gown. At my clinic's opening, when Mom told Dr. Wilson I was just the medical person while Madison played hostess. Their faces tightened, the lies unraveling under the weight of truth. I straightened, my pulse steady now. For the first time all evening, I felt taller than the mansion walls around me. This ends tonight. No more free treatments, no more handouts, no more pretending this is a family business. From now on, you pay like every other patient. You respect my boundaries, or you don't see me at all. Dad's face darkened, fury burning behind his glasses. Mom whispered, I never thought you'd put business before family. I met her gaze without flinching. I'm not putting business before family. I'm putting respect before exploitation. The words landed with the finality of a verdict, and in the stunned silence that followed, I knew I had redrawn the lines of this family forever. My words still vibrated in the silence when my gaze dropped to the lilies in the centerpiece. Their petals too white, too pure for this poisoned table. And suddenly, the years peeled back, memory after memory clawing their way to the surface like ghosts I had tried to bury. I was 12 again, seated at the breakfast table on my birthday. A math test paper with a bright red A+ lay proudly beside my cereal bowl. Next to it, a simple card. No gift, no balloon, just a card. 2 weeks later, Nathan's birthday arrived. He rolled into the driveway on a brand new mountain bike, its teal paint sparkling in the sun, streamers fluttering like banners of victory. Mom clapped. Dad laughed. I stood on the porch, holding the camera, asked to make sure you get a good shot of your brother. The ache from that day never left. Then graduation. I had worked for years, honor after honor, valedictorian. I scanned the crowded auditorium, praying to see them. Empty seats stared back until, 7 minutes late, they slipped in, just in time to tell me. Traffic was terrible. But don't forget Nathan's recital tonight. Later, Dad handed Madison my cap and gown for photos, laughing, saying, book smarts don't build practices. Charm does. The sting of invisibility was worse than any loan notice. Worse than any ramen dinner. I gripped the back of my chair in the present, nails digging into the polished wood. The flashbacks kept coming. Nights in grad school when I curled up on treatment tables, covering myself with scratchy patient blankets because I couldn't afford rent and malpractice insurance at the same time. The rejection letters from banks, each one citing lack of collateral, while my parents co-signed Nathan's car loan without hesitation. You were invisible, Claire, my mind whispered. They taught you to disappear so Nathan could shine. And yet, invisibility had forged me. I remembered another moment. A different kind of memory. My first clinic patient, a frail elderly woman who clasped my hands with tears in her eyes after her final therapy session. No one has ever treated me like I mattered, she whispered. That day, I realized my invisibility was not a curse but a gift. I had learned to see people others overlooked. Hope flickered like a candle in a darkened room. The scars of my childhood hadn't destroyed me. They had made me precise, relentless, compassionate. Every slight, every dismissal, every absence had carved me into someone stronger than the sum of their neglect. I straightened, releasing my grip on the chair. My voice in the present was steady, though my heart still trembled with old wounds. They taught me to disappear, I thought, locking eyes with Nathan. But now, I've never been more visible. And for the first time in years, the pain didn't crush me. It fueled me. The memories receded like waves pulling back into the ocean, leaving me standing on the shore of the present. My hands no longer trembled. My voice no longer quivered. For the first time that evening, I felt taller than the chandeliers, steadier than the marble beneath my feet. I looked directly at my father. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold, the same expression he'd worn my entire childhood whenever I dared to want more than he thought I deserved. "Claire," he said, his voice sharp, "you've changed. Success has made you cold." I let the words wash over me, then smiled. Not the polite, appeasing smile they had trained me to wear, but something sharper, something real. "No, success has made me visible, and you don't know what to do with a daughter you can't ignore." The silence that followed was seismic. Madison crossed her arms, her perfume thick and sour in the air, trying to reclaim control. "You're exaggerating. Patients like me, they've always said I make them comfortable." I turned to her, pulling another slim folder from my portfolio. I laid it on the table with deliberate precision. "Comfort? These are patient complaint forms with your name on them. Comfort doesn't cause insurance audits. Comfort doesn't drive patients away." She blanched, words dying on her lips. I straightened, my voice carrying across the table, calm but cutting. "The clinic is thriving without you. In fact, we just expanded. 20 staff members, a waiting list 2 months long, and a partnership with Pacific Health that will double our reach. While you were calculating profit shares, I was calculating outcomes. While you were chasing attention, I was building legacy." My mother's eyes welled with tears, but for once, I didn't let them sway me. "I never thought you'd put business before family," she whispered again, softer this time, almost pleading. I met her gaze, unwavering. "I'm not choosing business over family. I'm choosing respect over exploitation. And if you can't tell the difference, that's not my burden anymore." For years, I had been small in their shadow. Tonight, I stood fully in the light of everything I had earned. I gathered my papers, sliding them neatly back into my portfolio. Each click, each fold, was like hammering nails into a coffin. The end of their entitlement, the burial of my invisibility. "From this moment on," I said, my voice resonant, "my clinic is mine. My choices are mine. My life is mine." The chandelier above flickered once, then steadied, as if even the light had decided to stand with me. And as I looked around the table, their stunned faces, their broken certainty, I realized I had finally taken back the power they had tried to steal my entire life. The next morning, the heaviness of last night lingered in my chest like smoke after a fire. My parents' house, with its marble floors and chandeliers, had felt more like a battlefield than a home. But as I stepped into my clinic, the contrast struck me so hard it nearly stole my breath. The air was different here, alive, purposeful. Sunlight poured through wide windows, casting golden warmth over the reception area. Patients chatted quietly, nurses laughed with one another, and the familiar scent of eucalyptus drifted from the therapy rooms. This wasn't a battlefield. It was sanctuary. "Morning, Dr. Donovan," called Mark from the front desk, his voice bright. His tie was crooked as always, but his grin was genuine. "We've got a full schedule, but don't worry, I already moved a few things around to give you breathing space." Breathing space. Words my own family had never offered me. I walked the halls, pausing as Carlos, my lead therapist, guided an elderly man through careful stretches. "You've got this." "Mr. Green," Carlos encouraged, his tone steady. "Patient." Mr. Green's wrinkled face broke into a smile, sweat on his brow but pride in his eyes. Further down, Meredith knelt beside a stroke patient, her voice calm and reassuring. She glanced up, catching my eye, and smiled, a smile that said, "We're in this together." In the break room, Ellie, my clinic manager, set down a tray of coffees. "One for you," she said, sliding a cup into my hands. "Black, no sugar, just how you like it." I blinked, struck by the simplicity of it. They notice. They care. Last night, my parents had treated me like a prize to be divided, a resource to be exploited. But here I was more than visible. I was valued, not for what I could give them, but for who I was and what we built together. "Claire, you're needed in room 4, Meredith called softly. I stepped in to find Mrs. Abernathy, an 80-year-old woman with bright eyes, ready for her final session. She gripped my hands as I entered. "There she is," she said proudly. The miracle worker herself. I laughed, shaking my head. The miracle was your hard work, Mrs. Abernathy. Nonsense, she replied firmly. You gave me my life back. Her words landed with more weight than any approval my family had ever given me. As I guided her through her final stretches, I realized something profound. These people, this team, this community, was my family. The kind that lifted instead of drained, that gave instead of demanded, the kind I had chosen. And for the first time, I felt at peace with that choice. Peace, I was learning, never lasted long where my family was concerned. 2 weeks after the dinner confrontation, a ripple of whispers reached me, through patients, through colleagues. One morning, Ellie slid her phone across my desk. On the screen was my mother's Facebook post, dated just hours earlier, a smiling photo of us from the clinic's grand opening 3 years ago. Her arm around my shoulders, my smile stiff. The caption read, "So proud of my daughter Claire, carrying on the Donovan family business. Healing Hands has always been a family legacy. #your family business." My throat tightened. The audacity. They're rewriting the story, Ellie murmured, her voice low, cautious. Community members are asking questions. Some are confused. I closed my eyes, inhaled slowly. Of course, if they couldn't take control from the inside, they'd try to control the narrative from the outside. The next day, a formal envelope arrived at the clinic, my father's handwriting stark against the paper. Inside was a letter drafted by his attorney. An invitation to mediation, to revisit management terms for the clinic, in the interest of preserving family unity. Unity. The word curdled in my mouth. As if that weren't enough, Madison herself appeared at the front desk one afternoon, waving a glossy folder of marketing strategies. Mark, my receptionist, followed protocol perfectly, offered her a seat in the waiting room, then called me immediately. Through the glass wall of my office, I watched her cross her legs, scrolling her phone, pretending to belong. Not this time. I stepped out, heels clicking against the floor. Every staff member's eyes followed, silent solidarity radiating from them. Madison, I said evenly. You're not welcome here, she blinked, caught off guard. I'm just trying to help. Look, I've got ideas. Corporate outreach, social media campaigns. You had your chance, I cut in. My voice didn't rise, but it carried. The clinic isn't your playground. This team, these patients, this work, it's not yours to claim. Leave. Her cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth, but the weight of the staff's eyes silenced her. She gathered her things and stormed out, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the reception desk. Back in my office, I drafted an email, deliberate and final. To my family. Healing Hands remains closed to family employment or management input. All treatments will be billed at standard rates. My personal life remains separate from my professional one. These boundaries are non-negotiable. I hit send. My hands shook, but my chest felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't defending. I was leading, and I knew they could plot, post, or plead all they wanted. My boundaries would hold. 1 year later, I stood at the picture window of my expanded clinic, the Seattle skyline glowing gold in the afternoon light. The waiting room below bustled with patients, people who trusted us, who felt seen, who mattered. On the wall beside me hung the original business license, the frame worn but proud, surrounded now by community service awards and photos of my team. So much had changed. And yet, I felt more like myself than ever before. Dr. Donovan, Meredith called softly from the doorway. Your 3 o'clock is ready. Mrs. Abernathy's final session. Perfect timing. Inside the therapy room, Mrs. Abernathy greeted me with a grin that made her eyes sparkle. There she is, the miracle worker herself. I laughed, shaking my head. The miracle was your dedication. You did the hard work? She squeezed my hand. Maybe, but you believed in me when no one else did. That matters. Her words lingered long after the session ended. I realized that was the thread running through my entire life. Belief. I hadn't always received it from the people who should have given it freely, but I had found it elsewhere. In colleagues, in patients, in myself. and that was enough. That night, I joined my staff for our weekly dinner. We crowded around a long table at a cozy restaurant, laughter spilling louder than the clink of silverware. No false smiles, no hidden agendas, just belonging. To Claire, Ellie toasted, lifting her glass, for teaching us that standing your ground isn't selfish. It's survival. The table erupted in cheers, and warmth spread through me, not the brittle warmth of forced family dinners, but the steady glow of chosen connection. Later, as I walked home beneath the city lights, I thought about my parents, about Nathan, about Madison. Their voices had quieted, their demands had dulled. Sometimes a message still came, a letter, a plea, but I no longer carried their weight. My boundaries had become walls strong enough to hold me, but also doors I could choose to open if respect ever entered with them. And here's the truth I want to share with you, watching this now. If you don't draw your boundaries, someone else will draw them for you. Family, friends, coworkers, anyone. Boundaries aren't walls to keep love out. They're the guardrails that protect your worth. So I'll ask you, have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever had to fight to be seen? If you have, know this, you are not alone, and your voice matters. Type boundaries first in the comments if you're ready to stand taller, ready to be visible. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because when we stop apologizing for our worth, that's when healing truly begins.